We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to Zencaster.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for all things MCU. And as we have been for the last few weeks, we are continuing our coverage of Daredevil Born Again Season 2. This week, we are focusing on all things Episode 5, including spoilers. So please make sure that you have watched the episode before you listen to our episode, or you're going to get some pretty unpleasant surprises. With that out of the way, I'm so curious, Katie, what your thoughts were on this episode. So we're gonna dive in and start there.
Wait, why? Why are you so curious about my thoughts?
Just because I had some strong feelings coming out of the episode, and I would like to know what yours were before I share mine. Not that it'll change mine.
Funsies. Funsies. Okay. You know, I was trying to gather my thoughts on this episode because obviously when we're currently recording, guys, it's obviously not nighttime. So I watched it last night.
Yeah, we stopped doing that after episode 1. We were like, collectively, we hate this.
No,
so
that was
next day recording
awful.
it is.
Yes. Awful decision. Not
fun.
Again.
No.
We tried. We're so sorry. Well, you know what it really was? Episodes 2 and 3. Having those released together just was like, well, we're going to record at the earliest 10:30 at night. But anyway, not the point.
Moving on.
The episode in and of itself was very good. It was a very good episode. You don't agree? Makes me nervy. Okay. I thought as an episode, it was good. However, when we have 8 episodes of a show, this is where I struggle. There's always one of these in all of them. Well, we have 6 episodes and we have 9 episodes. There's always one of these where you're like, hey, so why did we take a really strong break from like the full narrative when this could have been a 5-minute section of the episode? And instead we made an entire episode about it. And like now we only have, what was that? That was episode 5. So now we only have 3 left. I struggled in that way. I thought the episode was enjoyable to watch. However, when you have 8 episodes and you took time to do this is the Doorman all over again. I loved the Doorman.
Yeah, but episode. I thought the Doorman had more purpose than this.
I mean, I agree. But it was definitely the same kind of concept where you like completely are removing from that story, the one you're watching, to kind of go into something completely different. So did I enjoy watching it? Yes, I did. I enjoyed watching the episode. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I was sitting there in those last few minutes and I was like, she's going to flatline. And then she flatlined. And I called that because I was like, no way they're going to have her live again. I can't do it.
I would have been so mad.
I would have been so mad.
And you guys know I love Vanessa. And I wanted her to live. But that was before episode 4. Like once you had done what you had done in episode 4, I was like, all right, now I'm committed to the idea of Vanessa dying. And then they like had her conversing with him and being completely lucid. And I was like, respectfully, no. Like, you have to
yes.
commit to the decision that you made last episode. I'm glad they did. Continue your thoughts, and then I will dive in further.
No, I mean, I completely agree too, because I honestly was like, ugh. Now, what I will say, I actually found the most, or I should say, I got the most out of the Kingpin and Vanessa portion of it. Because
I
I
don't
do
disagree.
think, I think for the first time, and not that we don't see him be human in other ways, I think we actually really humanized him for the first time, really ever, in my opinion. We saw how he was with Vanessa, how important and we know she's important to him, but like there was just a different level of human to Kingpin that I don't feel like we get often from him, almost at all. And it only is ever going to come out when it comes to Vanessa. And so I actually really enjoyed that, because I think the acting was done just so impeccably. It just really, I liked that she didn't die initially. I liked that portion of it, and that they drew it out enough that we really, now did I need the flashbacks? No. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, all the flashbacks, including the stuff with Foggy, I understood the point. Not my favorite thing that we did, not my favorite direction that we went with it, but whatever. I still liked how they told the story of her final moments. I think that was very well done.
Yeah, I will start there and then go to my overall thoughts. I agree with that piece about Vanessa and Kingpin and humanizing him. I saw someone online say, "Man, I can't believe they made me feel bad for him." Like, I can't believe they were able to do that. I think that's so true, because he is this kingpin of crime and he seems so indestructible, even when, and we've been talking about this a lot all season, he is getting battered from every side.
Yeah.
And he has pretty much enemies who are coming at him, in every which way. Even then, he does not seem destructible. He is Kingpin. He always finds a way out. This is the first time that you really see his vulnerability, that you see him scared. And you see, I think, too, it can be interesting, like, why does Vanessa stay with him? A lot of what I've been thinking about this season is, she gave up her ambitions for him, and she talks about how much she loves him. But I don't know that and I think maybe we did in some of the earlier seasons on the Netflix show, and it's just been a while. I don't know that we always get to see kind of that tenderness between them quite so much, or at least removed from the family business, right?
Yeah.
But here you got to see exactly how deep that love goes. And I think it makes it easier to understand why she felt so much love for him, why she felt so strongly for him, and so clearly how he felt that for her. And I think it makes the death that much more brutal, right? Because even though in the back of your head you're like, they're not going to let her live, right? He gets this moment of joy. Like, I've never seen Kingpin happier, I think, than when she opened her eyes and she was talking to him completely lucid. Yeah, there were some alarm bells when she asked for the pineapple juice, but otherwise he's like, you know what? Of all the things, if you want to be okay with pineapples now, honey, you can be okay with pineapples.
Yeah.
You get this beautiful moment of, them talking about how they met and everything like that. And then it shatters in 5 seconds and she dies in front of him. And it's like, oh wow, it's both closure and also like the worst salt in a wound that you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
And I do think that scene was very, very poignant. And I think that it almost is going to make him, I think, worse. If she had died on the table, it's like, well, they had done everything they could, and they did do everything they could. The surgery was successful, and then she was showing signs of improvement, and then, he lost her. But backtracking a little bit to my thoughts overall, I struggled with this episode, but for a lot of the reasons that you said. I think the fact that we ended the episode with the glass sticking out of Vanessa's head in episode 4. And then it took until the end of episode 5 for her to actually die. If you think, in terms of other characters, what is happening, with Daredevil and Bullseye, for example, all we see them do is basically move through the tunnel, hide in a church for 30 minutes or an hour, and then make it to Karen. There's not much progress on that front. And there is from an emotional, intellectual standpoint, and that's obviously the point of the Foggy flashbacks and things like that. But from a purely narrative perspective, we didn't make much progress. Now, on the flip side of things, if you're looking at, Buck and Daniel, they're doing things, right? Like that was the only piece of the narrative that I felt
It was
actually paced forward. I think Daniel's really gonna rip BB a new one the next time that he sees her. That's gonna escalate. So I'm curious to see kind of how that plays out. But I think we've talked about this before, and you mentioned it's like this once a season or once a series if it's not a multi-season show. They always have these episodes. They have these filler episodes where you're like, I see the point, but at the same time, you couldn't have moved the action a little bit more because you're coming off this high that was episode 4, and then you like pumped the brakes, and that was not what I was expecting them to do. And so it kind of caught me off guard.
I think it really does all come down to, again, they're just limited seasons. And yeah, we're getting a Daredevil season every year, and we're at this point, and so we're definitely spoiled in that way. But I do think, again, this isn't even the 13 episodes that Netflix gave. We're not even getting that. In which case, you do expect there to be an episode or two that kind of lulls a little bit, because you do need to kind of have these emotional moments, and sometimes the space for them is not in the middle of the action, and you aren't as able to take that naturally, so you do need to have an episode that revolves around it, and that's okay. I think if this is a show that we were getting 13 seasons of, this was the Netflix version of it, I don't know if I would have felt as weird about taking the time out of episode 5 to have this moment both on the Kingpin front and for Matt. I don't know.
If it was a binge model, I'd be fine with it. But a weekly release doing something like this, I'm like, okay.
I mean, that's fair because I have only watched the Netflix ones binging it because I was catching up on the whole Defenders universe. So I quite literally was able to end Daredevil and move right to all the next, like whatever the order they were in. I was like, okay, great. This was next.
Check off the list.
Yeah, literally. Like I had the screenshot. So like, I will say maybe that's why I'm feeling a little bit that way too, is we were able to just kind of watch and then keep going, so you don't feel it the same way you do when it happens and you're like, oh cool, we wait a week now for the next one. I still really, in its own way though, enjoyed the episode. Like I will say, like I didn't leave feeling completely like, and maybe it was because she flatlined at the end, and I think my biggest takeaway from the entirety of the episode was Kingpin and Vanessa. I actually could tell you very little about what happened between Matt and Bullseye and the Foggy flashback and all of those things. That backseated so hard for me that I don't even I was so taken with the storyline with Kingpin and Vanessa, and having her die at the very end of this episode, I actually really liked it. In that way, I thought that was such a smart decision, the way they played that out. And now, could we have had, to your point, Matt and Bullseye maybe moving more than just through tunnels? Yeah, I think maybe that could have added a little bit more to it, but I didn't mind taking the step back every couple minutes to remind us where Kingpin is with Vanessa and what that story looks like. Because if you're going to kill off his wife, we do need the big huzzah. We had the major moment in episode 4 where you were like, oh my God. And then she lives and you're like, oh. And so I appreciate it, I think, for this moment because, he's about to literally destroy everything. So I think we needed this back. Like, I do think we, in its own way, needed to pull back because I think the next 3 episodes are going to destroy New York City.
I see that argument. I was ready to go into full destruction. I think which is crazy to say. Y'all know I lived in New York for many, many years, and I love it immensely. I think for me, I have been looking forward to that climax so much. Not to harp on this, but we still don't have Jessica Jones. And, that's the pieces where I'm like, all right, there's a lot of stuff still coming. And then you took this episode and you really didn't move a lot forward. And that's where I just keep getting stuck. And it wasn't that I was not enjoying watching the episode. It was that I kept waiting for and so what? Give me more. Give me more. And then it really was only in those last few minutes, other than the Daniel and Buck storyline, that I was like,
yeah,
I waited an entire episode for this. And I was a little frustrated. That said, I do think there's a lot of value in the the Foggy flashbacks, especially. I mean, I know there's also a big piece of it that a lot of people are going to like, which is that they did bring in so many elements and characters and actors from the Netflix series, right? Like Wesley came back, obviously Foggy, I'm thinking less and less that Foggy over here is coming back. I actually think they may have killed him, which I've been in denial for over a year, so that's really tragedy. But I did love like that nostalgic element. I know a lot of people have been talking about how much they, love the connections back.
Yeah.
And with the Foggy piece, I think it all kind of ties into the conversation that we've been having all season about people really pushing Matt to embrace that darker side and embrace that willingness to kill, right? We've seen Karen push him on it. Now, even Bullseye was pushing him on it. That's a lot of what Bullseye was saying. Like, you think you beat your nature and then you walk around the corner and boom, there it is. That's your true nature. That's kind of the messaging that Matt's been getting. Yet at the same time, we see Foggy teaching him about mercy and about doing the right thing and about, going the extra mile for someone and not being judge, jury, and executioner. Because that's essentially what Matt was arguing. Well, he deserves this. He's a drug dealer. So what? Actions have consequences. And Foggy saying, yeah, but you're his lawyer. And then going the extra mile to give him the money to get him out, which then we find out actually saves his life from Buck, which is a beautiful kind of full circle moment.
I liked that.
Yeah, I think in terms of that conversation about to kill or not to kill, I actually think Matt's now going to be, after having this experience, then saving Bullseye, because that's what that parallel was. I think we're going to see him actually take a step back towards mercy and away from killing. He's been taking steps towards it. I think we're gonna see him kind of ground himself in the morality that Foggy helped him see. So I think I do what I'm trying to say here is I do understand the value of those flashbacks and kind of the overarching kind of moral dilemma that Matt's been having throughout the season, and even beginning last season, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because whenever we do the flashbacks in any of the shows or anything, I hate sitting there being like, I could do without them, because they do always add value, but like, they just feel so long.
And they slow it down.
They slow it down, and I just think I struggle with them because at the end of the day, we spent a lot of this episode, almost probably half of it, in flashbacks to some capacity. Yeah. And I understand, I get it, because I do think they told the stories they needed to tell. I think they had a clear purpose, but I do struggle because I'm like, we're not moving the current plot forward.
Right. And that's where I struggled.
Yeah. And to your point, if we really break it down, Matt spent most of it in a tunnel running.
Or that carrying Bullseye.
Yeah. But in the tunnel, running with him. Like, it's just this kind of, it does make me struggle because that was what ended up having to happen in order for them to tell the flashback story. Now, I do, to your point, the value of the flashback is clearly there. I think it's interesting because it was so well placed when you think about, obviously, this is Foggy's murder.
Yeah.
This is the person who literally killed him. And Matt...
For real. Like,
yeah.
Foggy's dead.
Well, yes, the denial that you've had, I think, unfortunately, is I think you're coming to. Yeah, yeah. But I do think, when you think about it from that perspective, what a clever way to tell the story for Matt to be like, hey, I actually, what is it, mercy? Like, I do actually need to show that. And as much as I don't want to, it's who I am. And you could tell the guilt of when he first left him there. And he was going to either leave him to die or let the task force get him, whichever happened first. And he is remembering all of this and remembering at the end of the day, Foggy, while being bullied his whole life by this guy that they were representing, still decided to do the right thing and help him and take the extra mile to help him. And to your point, it saved his life. And so it was really powerful in that way, because I think it showed that, obviously Foggy's not alive, but if this had been a different circumstance, Foggy would have still helped, Bullseye. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, he still would have done what should be the right thing and help him out and not leave him either to die or at the hands of the task force. And so there is a lot of value in the flashback. And I hate to sit there and when I complain about them, I hate to do it because at the same time, it's like, I get it. I understand why we're doing it, but it does just slow down the show and make it a little hard for me as we keep going. But to your point, I also liked we wrapped Buck into all of that. I
Yeah.
loved that because I think we talked about it in season 1 a little bit of okay, so he kind of replaced Wesley, but not really because Wesley was more of like a right hand man in like a business capacity.
Legal.
Yeah, more
Yeah.
than he was of getting his hands dirty. He had the people for that. He, was more of the person who gave those orders and the one who actually was doing it. But, he did replace him in the capacity of, I guess, a general right hand man because we see that Kingpin really does rely on Buck. And so I liked that we kind of got that answer of where Buck came from because I don't think we really understood that. I also like that he did overlap with Wesley. I think there's a lot to be able to say. It's like, okay, now this is starting to make sense. We're understanding where some of these characters, got their origin. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that we were wrapped up into some things earlier than Matt even knew.
Yeah.
And so that's cool. I think that's always an interesting perspective. So we did learn a lot from these flashbacks. We did get a lot out of them. We did get a lot of current character growth because of them. But it was a weirdly paced episode. That might be the best way to put it.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think, as we're talking more about it, I think it's that pacing thing that really is the rock in my shoe at this point.
Yeah.
Like, cuz I think if I'm intellectually breaking it down, I see why we did those flashbacks to everything you just said. But at the same time, it is again coming back to that idea of like, but I wanted more. I wanted to move that narrative forward. I do just want to circle back to Vanessa because I think that's the one flashback that we hadn't really talked about. Like, what was the purpose of that? I think, honestly, if I had to take a guess, it would be kind of her send off, right? It's like taking her story back to, the beginning, seeing it from her perspective, seeing how she always believed in that painting the same way that she always believes in Wilson, right? And that they've been fated this whole time essentially to cross paths. Something, that and I'll circle back to that in a second, but something that we didn't talk about last episode because it really didn't start to come out until after we'd recorded. But in that one of the final scenes of last week's episode, when Matt's running away, there's a shot of him outside Fogwell's, and you can see into the open window, and it is confirmed that that is the Watcher because the moment of Vanessa's death is, oh, Katie, what did we say that term was from What If?
Is that considered the absolute point?
Something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Regardless of the actual term that we have since forgotten because Marvel doesn't use them more than twice, is the idea that Vanessa's death is monumental to the universe. It is something that must happen, but yet is something that completely changes the course, or not changes the course, but really kind of amps up what happens in this universe. And so, you think about that, and then you think about, okay, she and Wilson were always fated to be together. They were always fated to meet because she believed in that, that painting. He showed up because he was trying to diversify his holdings, and they bonded over that, and that's how they were able to kind of build their love slowly. And yet at the same time, it's also acting as this beautiful kind of homage to the actress and the character, and this beautiful send-off of for all of Vanessa Fisk's prickly things that she's done and stepping in as the true Lady Kingpin, she's also, her story really is one of love. She found a man, she loved him, she may have changed her whole life a little bit for him, but that is kind of their story overall is one of just genuine love and respect for one another. So it was definitely beautiful, and I think to kind of what we've been saying before, it really adds then to that kind of heart-wrenching emotion that you feel at the end of the episode when she does flatline after they finish their first meet cute story, if you will.
Yeah, it does. And I do entirely believe it had to deal with giving the character and even the actress kind of her flowers of being like, you've played this role in this show. And Vanessa is so important, and not, It's kind of funny because when you think about it in comparison to like Foggy, we got like nothing. But I do think, not that Foggy is not important to Matt's story, because obviously he's his best friend. He very much is. But I do
He's his
think
moral compass.
he is. But
even
I do
in death.
Exactly. But if you think about it, like Vanessa is really all Kingpin's got.
Yeah.
As a character, that's the only other character that can rein him in, that can help him kind of think a little bit more clearly rather than just reacting how he would want to react. And most of the times that's violently or, murderously. And so I do think, knowing, and I love that they put her in white so much, and not even just in this episode, they always kind of put her in these lighter colors, in white and creams and things like that, because she is meant to represent kind of the good that can be in Kingpin. And so I do think it was important to kind of give her the send off they gave her in this episode, because again, we're about to see everything break loose post episode. Like what we're about to see is going to be crazy. And it's interesting because it's going to be hard to, like, I'm not really sure exactly what we're going to see. I can't even quite put my finger on what's going to happen next, because logically, I understand that he's going to use this as that stepping point to continue to go after the vigilantes, even just more aggressively. But we also only have, we're reaching that weird point where we start to say we also only have 3 episodes left.
Yeah.
And we know that at least to some degree, this storyline's not continuing into season 3. So what are we doing in the next 3 episodes that not only does everything have to hit the fan, but we also have to semi-defeat Kingpin to some capacity? My biggest thing is just without Vanessa, he just goes completely off kilter. And that's when people make mistakes.
Well, right. And then you start to bring in some of the well, I guess they're all unintentional spoilers, but some of the spoilers that we've been getting of season 3, right? And
Right.
the rumors that they're going to try to adapt Devil in Cell Block D moving forward into season 3. And now I haven't taken a deep dive into that storyline yet. I do know from a very, top level, Matt's in jail. I believe actually Iron Fist steps in to play Daredevil while Matt's in jail. So that's kind of interesting as well. Could be a good reason why Finn Jones is popping back into the role. There's a great video that we'll link below that's kind of where I got all my information. So those guys definitely know what they're talking about. We will, add that so you can check it out as well. You add that in and you're like, okay, so no Kingpin, Devil in Cell Block D. We know that Jessica is going to come in at some point in the next 3 episodes. She's got a daughter. Is it Luke Cage's daughter? He's going to be running or winning mayor. At some point, Sheila is mayor. Now, granted, I guess we don't know exactly what year Thunderbolts and this season are, because here's why I'm bringing this up. Obviously, Brand New Day is intrinsically linked to this season, especially.
Yeah.
We know that takes place in let me do the math here, 2023, 2020.
Live math right now.
Oh my gosh, guys.
On the spot.
We believe it's 2027 is what we've said, right? So, well,
I don't remember.
It's 4 years after No Way Home. And so Far From Home is right after, 2028, because Far From Home is a year after Infinity War. I'm sorry, Endgame. So that's 2024. Then No Way Home picks right up, but it takes place over a couple of months. So you say 2024, 2025. Then 4 years from then is 2028, 2029. So we're kind of in that range. The reason I bring that up is it looks like Sheila's going to be mayor at that point. But that's 4 years from now. So that leaves a space where there could be a special election where Luke Cage is mayor. And that's kind of how I'm plotting, how are we getting from point A to point B in all of these different things that we know are to some extent interconnected, and how these next 3 episodes, how do they then set us up for a lot of what we think is going to happen? I think the other qualm that I have with episode 5 is I was hoping we would come out of this episode with a little bit more direction on how that's all going to work. How are we taking Kingpin off the board? How are we then, divvying up kind of how that, who the big bad is, and what is his role moving forward? Because I don't think he's leaving. So like, what are we doing there? Those are the kind of questions that I'm like thinking about as we're moving into those last few episodes of the season.
I mean, I think we're taking him off the board because, like, I think we've started by this moment with Vanessa. Because, again, this is like that moment of, it's the beginning of the end. This is going to completely knock him off kilter. And he's been getting attacked from multiple directions all season. And it wasn't just Matt, and it wasn't just Bullseye. It's been Mr. Charles. It's been, people just rioting in general. People not liking, the governor. People not liking the task force. All of this stuff that is keeping he has a leak, which we know is BB, but like he has a leak in the office somewhere. So there's a lot going on that I think at one point he was managing. I think now he's going to be unable to. And so I do think we were on a precipice, and this has pushed him to the edge where this is going to be his downfall. What that fully looks like, to your point, that we didn't get much about, but I do think we know that this is just going to knock him entirely off kilter. And so kind of just have to wait to see how that's going to play out, unfortunately, because we don't really have much more to go off of. And to your point, timeline wise, there's going to have to be a special election. There's going to have to be something that happens. So I do wonder if, I don't know, I don't want to say he gets caught because I don't really think he will, but it's more of something really big does happen that knocks him kind of to the point where they're like, okay, we kind of need to, he can't be mayor, for XYZ reasons. There definitely is going to be something. I want to say a lot of that's going to come from Mr. Charles. I want to say that's the final maneuver, because that's the only chess piece I can't figure out where he plays yet. And last season, we paid no attention to the doc. And so now I'm going to, instead of ignoring Mr. Charles, because
and the guns. He's only been, don't forget the guns.
And the guns. Because I've only been watching, like he's only been in 2, maybe 3 episodes.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep my eye on him because, again, the only chess piece I can't quite figure out so far where he's playing and where he's going to maneuver is him. And that's what I'm more trying to figure out now that we're going to have an off-kilter Kingpin whose main focus is going to be Bullseye and Daredevil. Let's not forget. And the one time this man makes the most mistakes is when he starts getting horse blinders and can only pay attention to one thing, and he fixates. He is going to fixate. And that is when he is going to let other things fall through.
That is exactly what I was going to say. I think what you put so perfectly is he's been kind of juggling a lot. He's going to let all those balls drop. One of those balls is going to drop is Mr. Charles and those guns. I don't know that that's going to be necessarily his... Ooh, you know what I could actually see happening? Is the CIA moves those guns, it's done, but they find a way to frame him for that and make that public. Like exactly what Matt's been trying to do the whole time is show, his colors haven't changed. What is it? A tiger can't change its stripes. This tiger has the same exact stripes he had before he ran for mayor. But, now it's coming from a quote unquote legitimate source, because we know that anything that Valentina does is only quasi legitimate.
And I do want to bring up the Thunderbolts aspect a little bit to it, because we have them. I know I don't like the confirmation of the timing, but we do have to factor them in to think we have them operating out of New York, which means Valentina needs everything to be going in her best interest in that regard as well. So she can't have the mayor of New York completely off kilter. Also, can't have him completely going after this whole vigilante. Like, yeah, it was one thing when it was like the safer streets, but I'm sure he's going to absolutely lose it at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And she can't afford to do that when you have her Avengers sitting there. So I do think
or maybe not.
But from a higher level, there's also that aspect of it is it's all appearance. It has to be how it all appears. And you can't have a mayor who's like, all these guys are bad, because that's the direction it's going to go, just for them to sit here and it's like, no, but not our Avengers. Like you can't do both. You can't have that both happening. So I do think even from like a logistical perspective, she's gonna need him out. Like she's gonna. That's just he's going to absolutely like just be a menace and worse than usual, and it's not going to be done cleanly. That's the problem.
Yeah, I also think Valentine is just petty. So she's gonna be PO'd that her whole plan, like Mr. Charles, I think they actually have kind of similar temperaments in that like they're just gonna be annoyed that they were thwarted by Kingpin and his very big feelings. Like essentially that's what is happening. And I'm not, I'm not trying to make light because the man lost the person he loves most in the world. So, but at the end of the day, that's what's gonna cause him to lose that strategic thought and how do they move forward with the guns and all those things. A lot of what he and Mr. Charles were talking about in episode 4. So I do kind of like the idea of Mr. Charles, by extension the CIA, by extension Valentina, kind of being the ones who ultimately stab him in the back because he has become such an unreliable partner to them that they not only have to kind of skirt around him to achieve their goals, but then both for, I think, petty reasons and also logistical reasons, just need him to be removed to, move so that they can actually move forward. Because the other thing I want to point out here, and this is something I think we talked about last episode, but Red Hook is a free port, regardless of whether or not Wilson Fisk is mayor. He just happens to be the one controlling it. But if he's off the board, the CIA can then use that free port on their own. Right now, they just need him because he's the guy who has all the people there and he has his anti-vigilante task force working out of there. So he kind of controls the area. Remove him, you have like no obstacles left, and it's actually yours to do with whatever you want. And I think that ultimately Mr. Charles is going to see, and by extension Valentina is going to see the value in just removing the middleman. Why should we have to check with him? Why should we have to work around him? And we are the CIA. We can do whatever we want, and we can find a way to remove him. I mean, I could actually see them actually working with the governor. I mean, because think about it, their truce between the governor and the Fisks is no longer valid because Vanessa Fisk, who is really that centerpiece of that truce, is dead. So that's the other piece there. I just think I love that kind of theory that's how that all happens. I think then if he ends up in jail, that could be super interesting if he and Matt are in jail together. Again, I haven't done my research yet on the Devil in Cell Block D, so TBD on whether or not that actually is part of that storyline. I mean, also just a caveat, we don't even know that that's 100% the storyline. It's just like looking very much like Secret Wars did in 2022. But, without that confirmation, we don't know. I'm so excited for the next 3 episodes, though. I think they're going to be some of the most intense episodes of Daredevil that we've ever seen.
Yeah. I just want to add to some of that just to also mention, because you were talking a lot about him being a bad business partner. I think that was partially the value of adding the flashbacks as well to include Wesley. Yeah. As a gentle reminder that not that Kingpin wasn't making the decisions he wanted to make himself, because he certainly was, but Wesley and Buck are not the same. Buck is a killer. He's there to always defend. He's there to always do the dirty work. But at the end of the day, he is not a businessman and he's not an advisor. Right. And that was the role Wesley did play. That was not a 1-for-1 transfer when that changed. And so I do think it's important that flashback had him especially so prevalent in it as well, because the one thing Buck can't do is, because before Vanessa, Wesley was the one who could bring Kingpin back. But he was trusted, but he could also carry the business when he needed him to. And so when Kingpin did go off kilter for whatever reasons he was going off kilter,
usually Daredevil.
Usually. But Wesley kept him controlled, or at least kept the business part of it controlled when Kingpin was off doing his own thing. You do not have that. That is completely lost. And now you don't have Vanessa, who was also an advisor. She, if anything, her and Buck kind of split that role of being that person that Wesley was from the start for Kingpin. And now Vanessa's gone. And I'm sorry, I appreciate Buck, but he is not going to sit there and be able to cover for both of those individuals anymore. That's just not possible. And I do wonder the capacity to what that's going to look like now that Daniel's kind of getting brought into the dirty work, which is entirely for a test, entirely to test his loyalty now. And I think we talked about this. I just don't know if he has the guts for that. And he's young. I just don't know if he's going to be capable of it.
I mean, that part of the episode was honestly one of the, I mean, there was a lot going on, but I have really kind of invested in this whole Daniel storyline. Like, I find it really interesting for something that's not the main plot. Whenever, there's something with him and BB or him and Buck, I'm always like, I'm so curious how this is gonna end. Like, it's just really piqued my curiosity. And I also kind of like low-key love their like weird blossoming bromance. Like, they're such an odd couple in that like Buck is so serious and he's a veteran and he was like in special ops or whatever. And then you have Daniel, just this kid from Staten Island who like really, really loves hot dogs and is obsessed with Wilson Fisk. And they're just like such an odd match, but they kind of balance each other out really nicely. So that storyline just kind of tickles me, and it just makes me kind of chuckle. But in terms of kind of your question about whether he's going to be able to truly embrace, the reality of Kingpin, because I think we've talked a lot about, he views Kingpin with these rose-colored glasses, right? This idea that, he fights for the little guy or the unseen guy or the underdog, I think is maybe the best way to put that. And I think, they see a lot of each other in each other. Like, I think Daniel sees what he aspires to be in Kingpin in a lot of ways. And I think Kingpin, as we've said, sees a lot of his younger self in Daniel. Yeah. And it is interesting because, there are moments in the car where Daniel thinks that he's the victim, especially when Buck like rolls out of there with the saw and the shovel. Daniel's like, oh my God, I'm it. I'm going to die. Yeah. Like, this is it. And I think the reason that I believe he's going to be able to go deeper into the Kingpin organization and that side of it is because he wasn't even really begging for his life. He was actually saying, like, I know I probably messed up. I'm sorry. Basically, like you don't have to do it. Well, he was kind of begging for his life now that I think about it, but he was like still loyal, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, he was like, I won't say a word. I will go. I will live my life. And I almost in some ways saying I deserve this. And it was weird. Like, you can see how kind of warped he is in his thinking because he's so incredibly loyal to Kingpin. So between that and the fact that it's coming off of the back of BB once again burning him, I think she was kind of the one thing that was saving him from going
I was
deeper.
Just about to say that.
And I think the fact that she did that again in such a heightened and emotional moment. Also, girl, like, could you have been more transparent? I don't understand the point.
I need her to stop. Like, she actually is driving me crazy. I didn't understand how stupid you could be. Yeah. And the thing is like, she also knows who she's messing with.
Yeah.
Which is what I don't understand at all. I don't understand why she's playing around, and I don't know if there's part of her doing it in hopes that it'll get Daniel out of there in its own like weird warped way of like, the more she's able to prove, the more she's able to kind of get him and convince him he needs to leave, and then they can blow, the popsicle stand wide open, do whatever they got to do. Maybe, I don't know, but like, if there's one thing about her, I'm like, you are just making the worst decisions you can make. Like, I just don't get it. And your uncle would not have made the same mistakes. Now, okay, whatever. She's not her uncle, but I'm just saying, like, I just don't understand why. And it's so obvious. It's so clear to have pinned it on her because who else? Who else?
Yeah.
And it's so aggravating because I'm like, what was the purpose of it too? What was the reason? What did you get out of giving that information out to the public?
Well, right. I think with the stuff about the Northern Star, it was like he had his suspicions that it was her, right? and he confronted her about it. But there was enough there to have plausible deniability. He couldn't
Yes.
prove a thing. And then she goes and she does this. And while it's not the same caliber in the sense that, like, it's not her then putting it on, like, let me say it this way. It's not a direct line between her and the Fisk parody, right? So she's
Right.
not, like, completely shown her cards there, which may be why she thinks this is okay, but she is showing that she's willing to leak, which is just going to make the suspicion on the Fisk parody being her, or that she's helping them, even worse. So
Yeah.
it did, I was like, when that got out, I was like, BB, why? Like, that wasn't even worth it. Like, there was nothing that was incriminating towards Fisk that, to your point, that making that public would have made him look bad.
No.
Instead, you've just invited press to their door. And I'm sorry, like, regardless of what you think about Kingpin, that's just wrong. Like, they are dealing with an extremely tragic family matter, and you decided this was a good moment to use that to sell the information. Like, girl, that's not great. I don't love that. And so circling this back all the way to Daniel, having that happen on such a heightened moment, such a heightened day, I think he feels like the one ally he had that was not a Fisk ally is really not his ally. I think he's finally going to take action against BB, whether he tells Buck eventually or he takes care of her on his own. I think she kind of inadvertently pushed him over the edge today, or this episode, and I think that he is going to become a true loyalist in the sense that he will have the full understanding of the scope of what Kingpin is truly doing, both as mayor and as, you know, continuing to be the Kingpin.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you say it like that, I don't think he has, I guess I should say, I don't think he has the stomach to do the killing. I don't necessarily think I see that, but I do almost wonder, as we've had this conversation now about Wesley and the role that he played, if there's a future for Daniel to almost play a similar role. I do, because think about it, he's also been so molded now by Kingpin that he's really like the most ideal advisor, because he knows, like, obviously doesn't know everything, but now we're getting on the cusp of that being a possibility, but he knows the inner workings, and he's still, at the end of the day, super smart. He got himself in the position he got himself in for a reason. And when Kingpin admires you too, I think there's a lot that goes for that. I would agree. I think BB is pushing him to the edge, and I think if it was intentional, it's not working out the way she's going to think it's going to. I think she assumes his crush on her and everything else is a lot stronger than it actually is. And that's going to be enough to pull him away. And I don't think it is.
Yeah. And let's not forget, Buck called Daniel the heir apparent. Like, he is potentially being groomed to take over and continue this, you know, this, what's the word I'm looking for?
Empire?
Dynasty's not it. There we go. Empire. I was like, it's somewhere along those lines. He's potentially being groomed to take this over when Kingpin is no longer around or able to, or even wants to. And so it is about time, if you're going to think of it from that perspective, that he is, you know, being more or becoming more involved in some of the less savory portions of the business. But I also think, and I think you alluded to this, a lot of it was a loyalty test too, right? Because I think especially Buck, because I think Buck pays a lot of attention to Daniel because he is someone who has come in from the outside and he is a little untested. Mm-hmm. I think Buck knows that Daniel knows who it is and that he's potentially protecting someone. And this is his loyalty test, right? And where BB miscalculated is she unfortunately is giving reason for Daniel not to be loyal to her on the exact day he's getting a loyalty test from the other side. And so it's going to be much easier for him to just be like, okay, I am going to help you bury this body. And also, by the way, I know who the leak is. Mm-hmm. Like, I figured it out. I have the proof now. Because, and he can almost spin it, if he wants to save his own skin, he can almost spin it as, look, maybe this wasn't the right information to do it with, but I gave it to BB as a test because I suspected her of being, you know, informing the Fisk parody, and look, here she is, right? Yeah. Here she is doing, you know, spreading the information that only she knew, and now suddenly all the journalists do, that proves that she is not loyal to this administration. So I think there's definitely a way for Daniel to come out of this scot-free if he really wants to embrace, the less savory side of what it means to be running in Kingpin circles.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the more we talk about it, I do think I see it kind of happening. I think the reason I don't want it to is because I don't want to see Daniel go down that road.
I know.
Like, selfishly,
he kind of made me love him a little bit, which is so odd.
I know. I selfishly don't want to see him do it, but I do think, the more we talk about it, I do think that is very much the direction it's going to go. Which is sad for him.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be very interesting, but it's frustrating to see a character kind of make that final turn, which I think he's on the way to.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the only thing that we haven't talked about yet that we have to is the title character. I mean, he didn't make a lot of progress this episode. He was with Bullseye, but what do we think is kind of next for the two of them? How is that, now that Matt is fully in this camp of mercy, which we know that Karen is maybe not so supportive of, how do we think that's gonna evolve over the next few episodes?
I don't know. No, honestly, it's hard because it was a weird episode for him because he quite literally did not move much. I mean, he moved a lot. He moved throughout the whole city. But I think it's hard because he was obviously trying to stop Bullseye, didn't do that successfully, then was going to have that moment where he was going to let him, whatever, decided against it, had his moment of mercy. I do think in that way he moved forward. However, in comparison to what could be coming to him, it's hard to understand what exactly or how exactly he's going to react to it and how he's going to defeat Kingpin, because they even say it. They're like, if Vanessa dies, we're screwed.
Yeah.
Well, now
she's basically holding the whole city together, essentially.
Yes. And now she died. At the end of the episode, dead. So I think it's hard because we haven't fully seen Kingpin go off his rocker enough to know what Matt's going to have to respond to. And it's hard because, well, you saved Bullseye's life, and I don't think they'll be killing him off. They just killed off Vanessa. I think there's not a reason to kill him off as well, especially when so far he's still alive. They got back to Karen, so still alive. And so now it kind of comes into question, what happens with him and Bullseye? Where does Jessica fit into this? How do they go up against Kingpin? I think those are all the questions we're not going to have answers. And I can't even begin to kind of put together what that looks like. Because again, I don't know Kingpin's exact next move.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to think, like, how will he even up the pressure from what he's been doing? Like, it's been very much like pedal to the metal with the anti-vigilante task force in terms of, the level of violence, the way that they're, in all the things we've talked about, the way that they're not really adhering to what's considered law basically everywhere else, and in New York on most days not under the Safer Streets Act. So it's almost hard to imagine, like, how does he even basically best himself in terms of level of intensity. I think one of the things that will be interesting, and I was texting with a friend who is also a Marvel fan and had watched the episode, and he was saying, one of the things I'll be interested to see is how Karen takes this potential collaboration with Bullseye, because we know that when Matt was kind of softening to him a couple of episodes ago and softening to the idea of working with him and maybe not, killing him outright, Karen was like, that dude killed Foggy. Like, she had no there was no like forgiveness there, which, she doesn't have to. He killed one of her best friends. I get it. Yeah. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that Matt and Karen are at very different places when it comes to Bullseye. So it'll be kind of interesting. They have been so in lockstep in what we can assume is the 6 months in between episode 1 and episode 2, and also thus far in season 2, the relationship is probably the healthiest and the best it's ever been, and yet this might be the thing that kind of really drives a wedge in it, because they both feel so strongly about Bullseye and what to do with him. So that I think is definitely something to watch out for as we hit the next few episodes, but especially I think episode 6.
Yeah, and I think that's going to actually take focus. I think this episode took focus more on Kingpin and Vanessa. I think that will be taking the main focus of the next episode.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I could see that happening.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah. There's a lot to come. I'm both scared and excited. Scared because I'm scared of Kingpin in this state, and excited because I'm like shook to see what he's gonna do. There's no other way to put it.
I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean, Deanna Frio is just gonna like kill the role. I mean, he's brought a lot of intensity over the years, but this is gonna be an intensity that we've just never seen. So I'm excited to see his performance, especially. I think he's gonna absolutely just blow us all away.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Alrighty. On that note, I think we've covered the majority of what we wanted to cover, or the main topics, I should say, of episode 5 of Daredevil Born Again. Season 2 will be back next week, of course, covering episode 6. You can follow on your podcast platform of choice to make sure that you never miss an episode. And also check out our calendar, which is on the website linked below, and our Buy Me a Coffee if you are inclined to support the show.
You guys can also give us a follow on all of our socials, which are also linked in the show notes down below. And we'll be back next week covering episode 6. Make sure you guys are watching Daredevil Born Again season 2, as Marvel just blew your mind. So let's talk about it.